could keep going. I'm not going
I
to use them. All right. What is today? July 16th. Right. Good morning. It's Wednesday, July 16th. I'm New York City Controller Brad Lander. This is my 7th trip to immigration court. Today's hearing felt like honestly like a murderous reality show. So we were in Judge Kouris's courtroom, and she first had a series of remote hearings. And so everyone with a remote hearing, of course, got their new dates, and their cases were adjourned. There was along the way, before the final 3 cases that I'll get to in a minute, one in-person hearing with a young man who spoke Wolof, which means he's probably from Senegal or Gambia. And the judge granted him until next year to get a lawyer, and so of course we were very anxious because there were ICE agents waiting right outside the courtroom. But he was terrified that he was going to be abducted, but he was able to walk out, and he'll be able to come back next year, hopefully with an attorney. She then concludes the remote hearings, but the ICE agents are still out in the hallway, and she says there are 3 remaining in-person hearings, and it really felt like some kind of hideous game of like Trumpian roulette. The ICE agents are in the hallway. At least one of these 3 cases are going to be abducted. The first was a beautiful family of 4 from Colombia, father, mother, and 2 kids, 15 and 16. And thankfully they were able to walk out, but that just left 2 cases, Luis and Carlos. In both of these cases, Judge Kouris said, and I hadn't heard a judge do this before, pursuant to the Convention Against Torture, I am granting you a hearing on your asylum application. So these are individuals who are not eligible for temporary protective status, but in both cases they have filed asylum applications. And the judge acknowledged that they're entitled to hearings on their asylum applications, her words, pursuant to the Convention Against Torture. She scheduled those asylum hearings for July of 2029 and gave extensive instructions, first to Luis and then to Carlos, on how they should prepare for their hearings on their credible fear of persecution if they are deported back to their country. So she explained to them in detail that though they're not required, they would be wise to get a lawyer. Though they're not required, and in each case they had actually written fairly extensive statements about why they feared persecution. In one case, the gentleman Carlos, who I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute, from Paraguay, he apparently in his application had talked about dangerous interactions he had had with the Paraguayan police. And the judge said, for example, if you have documentation or affidavits about your interactions with the police, you should provide those as well, as though they were going to get a genuine credible fear hearing on their quite credible applications. But it is just a charade. It is just a charade, and the judge knew it, and the lawyer, the Latina lawyer from the Department of Homeland Security knew it, and the ICE agents in the hallway knew it, and we knew it. Just a charade. Again, it has the trappings of a judicial hearing, but it's just a trap to have made them come in the first place. Maybe the most agonizing was this final case. So Luis goes out and is abducted. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm sorry for Luis, but maybe at least the ICE agents will disperse, because Carlos is the one whose family I had talked to in the courtroom and gotten to know a little bit. But unfortunately, even after they took Luis, the ICE agents took their positions up outside the courtroom, making it very clear for everyone to see that Carlos was not going to be able to walk out of his hearing. At this point, his family members, his sister is a U.S. citizen. She's in the courtroom. He has 2 other relatives there. He's from Paraguay. They're figuring out what's happening and starting to blame themselves for it, thinking we shouldn't have come to this hearing? If he's going to be abducted from this courtroom, why did we show up? We should have just stayed away from the courtroom and taken our chances. And his sister in particular feels like the whole thing is now her fault instead of Donald Trump's fault, even though they are fleeing danger and persecution in Paraguay, as they have a right to under the Global Convention Against Torture. I spoke up in the courtroom, which I have never done before. You're not really authorized to as a friend of the court. But I said, Your Honor, please ask the government, ask the Department of Homeland Security not to interfere with Mr. Lopez's ability to comply with the order that you have just given him. You've ordered him to come back here in July of 2029, and you know the ICE agents in the hallway are about to abduct him and deny him the opportunity to comply with your legal order. But the judge, who works for the same boss as the prosecutor, who works for the same boss as the ICE agents, did not do any such thing, did not ask the government to ensure that he would be able to comply. And so when they left the courtroom, not only did a gang of masks, and they pull their masks up even higher now, it's like you could barely see them through their balaclavas and hats without any identifying information or badges or warrants, grabbed Carlos and then, quickly moved him toward the back stairwell. And then they were super aggressive with his sister Porfiria, who was just trying to hug her brother goodbye, basically. But they roughly shoved her to the ground, as you have seen them do, as I have seen them do in many cases. So we spent a minute connecting them with legal assistance, and I hope that they'll be able to file a habeas motion on Carlos's case, as has happened on a lot of these cases, because again, and I'll emphasize, this is not like what was happening 2 weeks ago when the government was making a motion to strip people of status. Carlos not only has status as an asylum seeker, not only has an application pending for asylum, Carlos has a court date in this building in July of 2029, at which the judge carefully instructed him on how to prepare to bring his case, to provide additional information about his interactions with the Paraguayan police, and make his case under the Global Convention Against Torture for why he is entitled to asylum in the United States. Unfortunately, Carlos is going to have a hard time complying with the judge's order because he was just abducted by ICE agents, and we don't know what detention facility that they will bring him to. What we do know is they'll be aggressive and rough with him, as they were with his sister and his family, that they will provide very little information about where they're taking him, that they won't make any effort to make sure that he has counsel. We will do the best that we can. And that they are going to do everything they can to stoke fear into Carlos and into his family and into everyone else watching. And I guess I would just say, and I have emphasized with you guys a lot of times that what's at stake here is not just Carlos's rights under the Global Convention Against Torture, is not just how this country and how this city treats asylum seekers and immigrants. It really is that what is at stake is the rule of law. Because what Carlos's sister was persuaded of today was that they should not have come to this hearing. And we tried to say to her, this is not your fault. If he had not come to the hearing, they would have issued an order for his removal. But I don't know how you could persuade anyone that anything like the rule of law is taking place in these buildings when you sit there and you listen to a judge, apparently in good faith, describe the hearing that your brother is going to have in 4 years on his fear of persecution, only knowing, and she knows too, like the judge is in on the murderous reality show that is taking place up there, because she knows too that Carlos is not going to be able to appear for his hearing because she can see the ICE agents in the hallway just like we could see them, and just like Carlos could see them, and just like Carlos's sister could see them, and just like anyone who comes down here to observe could see them, just like anyone with eyes to see could see. The rule of law is being eroded by the hour in these buildings. And I've said this to you before as well. I'm going to keep coming and bearing witness and trying to figure out what else we can do to make sure that people that don't have counsel get counsel, that we represent everyone that we can. But it is nowhere near enough. We are allowing the rule of law to be eroded case by case, person by person, And more is required of us than standing by and watching it happen. So thank you very much to all of you guys who are out here bearing witness. I know it is not easy for the volunteers to do. I can speak to that personally. I know it's not easy for the journalists to do. It is sure not easy for the families to do. And I'll be glad to take your questions. No, I don't have any problem going in. Honestly, the security guards who don't work for the federal government, the security guards work for I guess I don't know who the security guards work for. I should find that out. They're very friendly and don't have any, they let us upstairs and let us witness what's happening, and there was no trouble getting in or out of the building except for those people who are detained. Oh yeah. I meant to talk about this. Yeah, I meant to talk about this. This is an important question. I said this last week, but I'm going to just maybe put an even finer point on it, try to underline it a little more. It is great, when the governor helped, spring me from detention. It was great that she announced that the state put $50 million more in for legal services for representation for immigrants, exactly like Edgardo, who I had come out with that day. And exactly like Carlos today. And the city as well allocated about $50 million for legal services, but none of that has yet hit the ground. The people, Carlos didn't have a lawyer, and Luis did not have a lawyer, and the Wolof gentleman that I mentioned did not have a lawyer, and that beautiful Colombian family of 4 did not have a lawyer, and they all needed lawyers. And Carlos and Luis need them the most urgently now to file habeas proceedings and try to put a stay in federal court on their detention or deportation. But all 4 of them need lawyers to comply with the legal proceedings that are moving. And it's wonderful that there are so many volunteers here, and you guys see this now, those of you who are here, we're all pretty poorly tooled to provide assistance. We got these little know your rights cards in multiple languages, and we're doing our best to communicate with people as best we can to prepare them for what's going to happen, to let them know how to follow up. I'm just typing Carlos's sister's name and number on my phone and trying to make sure that we connect them to a lawyer, and thankfully there's a lawyer from the New York Legal Assistance Group, and hopefully they will be able to move very quickly to file a habeas proceeding. And we were able to connect Edgardo and his family to an attorney, but it is an utterly haphazard process. And while it's good, and I really do urge all New Yorkers, elected officials, religious leaders, lawyers, non-lawyers, New Yorkers, come out and see for yourself what's happening. There are a lot of groups doing this. Today we were here with Jews for Racial and Economic Justice. You can also volunteer with Immigrant Arc or with the New Sanctuary Coalition or the New York Immigration Coalition, and you'll get some information and some Know Your Rights cards. But what is urgently needed right now is a more coordinated approach to providing legal assistance. That's what the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs should be doing. Once upon a time in the prior administration, the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs was an office that would have sought to coordinate those resources effectively, let people know what's happening on the way in, get people connected to attorneys, follow up on the way out, make sure those dollars from the state and city are providing representation, and that is not yet happening. So I am going to continue not just pleading, but working in every way I can with the governor. I'm not so optimistic about working with the mayor, but the mayor should do it too, and the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs should do it, to get that money on the ground right now, so that by tomorrow, by the time you guys are back, or by next week, by the next time I'll be back, we could be providing everybody who's here with legal representation to give them the best advice. If the best thing you can do right now is get a remote hearing. So we should be putting the call out to every New Yorker who's got a hearing in this building next week. Here's how you can get legal representation. Here's how you apply to have your hearing remotely so that you don't wind up being abducted from a federal courthouse. And if you are, make sure that at least we're providing representation to you. Well, look, if you have the opportunity to have a virtual hearing, that's the best. So step 1 would be let people know to get a lawyer and apply to have their hearing remotely. Now, people in the morning are coming for check-ins, like Yasser, who I came with last week. He had to come in person, but he had a lawyer and he was able to walk out. So you need a lawyer for your individual case to explain to you whether you have to come in person, whether you could get a remote hearing, to present. Maybe a lawyer could have done better than I was able to do for Carlos in front of the judge to say, Your Honor, you just granted him a hearing. What can you do to make sure my client will be able to appear for the hearing that you granted? I was just some nut screaming from the back of the courtroom, but we could have had a lawyer with him. So yeah, in each individual case. And then if they do detain you, then you need a lawyer who can file a habeas motion in federal court, not in these kangaroo courts. I mean, it's just worth saying, we call these courts. But again, like if the judge, the prosecutor, and the ICE agents all work for the same boss, and it turns out that none of them have to actually follow the rule of law, I don't know if that's a legal proceeding. It's not a legal proceeding like I learned about when I was in school, or like we try to ensure in the city of New York for the Comptroller's office. So now what Carlos and Luis need is a lawyer to file a habeas motion in federal court to assert that the immigration courts have violated their rights and demand that their bodies be produced. And all of that could be done far more effectively than it is by the city and the state. And let's get that $100 million doing it by tomorrow, or at least by next week. We'll do on first, yeah. Yeah. I have not heard anything from SDNY, so I assume they're not, well, I shouldn't say I assume. I have not heard anything from the SDNY, so I don't know what's being, what's happening in my case. They were more aggressive with Carlos's sister than they were with me. Like, they just flung her to the ground, although they did not detain her. They threatened to arrest her, but they did not arrest her. Sorry, your first question. Oh. The judge responded saying, basically, that my hands are tied, that I don't have any, authority here. It sure looked to me, if I know from people's facial expressions, like she knew exactly what was going to happen and exactly what I wanted to say is, Your Honor, they're making a mockery of your courtroom. You've just granted this Carlos a case 4 years from now, and you know that he's not going to be able to show up. And it sure looked to me like she knew what was about to happen, but she did not do anything more.
Any more on-topic questions? Going once, going twice. Okay, we can do off-topic.
You mentioned having to work with legal. I don't know if you saw the lawsuit from the former interim police commissioner this morning against the administration.
I believe that there's a lot more merit to the charges being brought by that former NYPD officer against the department and the Adams administration than there is to anything that is happening in these courthouses. So, and that individual at least can expect like a legal proceeding and the rule of law to apply. So, I can't speak to the individual case because the Comptroller's got a role as claims against the city, but, and I obviously haven't had a chance to review them as well, but I don't know. I'm a very optimistic guy. Hope springs eternal. So every day I wake up thinking maybe this will be the day when Eric Adams decides to run an ethical, legally compliant, grounded in New York City values administration. There's so many opportunities, Mr. Mayor, today. There's that $50 million. Assign your mayor's office of immigrant affairs to come show up for New Yorkers. Stop running a corrupt crony administration. Stop weaponizing anti-Semitism against the highest-ranking Jewish elected official in the city, as seems to be Randy Mastro's gig this week. Show up for New Yorkers, and I'm an optimist, so every day I'll say there's still time, but so far he has not shown me that he's headed in that direction. Thanks, everyone.
When are you coming back?
Next week. I've been doing it about once a week, so we'll be back next week.